Hello friends, and thank you for coming back to another week in our journey through the book of Daniel. This week marks the 3/4 mark in this series. How did that happen? As always, we will talk for a few minutes about Daniel chapter 9, and then we'll have 3 questions we want you to answer. As usual, our hope is that this will inspire great, in-depth conversations in all our groups, which will help us as we learn about Jesus and what it means to be a disciple. All right, let's get into Daniel chapter 9. One of the many things I've enjoyed about my own study of Daniel is that it satisfies my need for a sense of adventure. It's spread across multiple nations and time periods and is full of intrigue, danger, and excitement. But it also allows me to draw closer to God as He reveals Himself through the visions He's given to Daniel. And chapter 9 is especially meaningful because it gives me a model of the kind of intercessory prayer that's available to any follower of Jesus. Now, chapter 9 also helps to satisfy my urge to get into eschatology, our end times events. I hope you're enjoying it. The chapter is divided into 3 major sections. The first, verses 1 through 3, shows us that Daniel was able to determine the length of time that he and the people of Jerusalem would be in exile by way of his study of the scriptures, specifically Jeremiah 25. Now think of it as an equivalent to your modern day Bible study. It's been said that God does not reveal Himself to the curious, but to the committed. Now, Daniel was committed to his study of the scriptures, and I hope you are too. And perhaps you will see a greater dialogue with God as you delve more deeply into His Word. Now, Daniel's prayer for the people in exile runs through verse 4 through 19. The third section runs from verse 20 through 27 and deals with the length of time the exile will last. So first, let's deal with Daniel's intercessory prayer. Daniel and the people of the second exile had been in Babylon for about 65 years when verse 1 was written. It's interesting to note that Daniel was not in a position of direct authority over the Jewish people, but still felt the freedom and obligation to pray to God on behalf of the people of which he was a part. The prayer begins with verse 4 and includes elements of humility, worship, confession, and petition. Interesting is the spiritual preparation Daniel made for his ministry of intercession. He fasted, he mourned, and clothed himself in sackcloth. Now, even though these actions are very specific to the ancient Jewish culture, I think there is something that we all can learn from his example. Do you prepare yourself before beginning a time of prayer? Something we can all do is silence the distractions that keep us from going deeper with God, specifically our phones and other devices. So how often does Facebook or Instagram take precedence over our prayer life? And Daniel realized he could not appeal to God on the basis of any merit of the Jewish people. By their persistent transgression of the covenant relationship with God, they had literally compelled him to act. They had embraced heathen idolatry and immorality, and they had martyred the prophets he had sent them. So verse 23 is instructive in that God responds to Daniel's prayer as soon as he began to pray. Daniel's faith and humility were precious in God's eyes and shows us that the Lord is more eager to answer than we are to ask. Now just think about that for a second. What an inspiring thought. So the third section of chapter 9 is sometimes referred to as the 77s. So all you mathletes out there are going to love this. So fire up your calculators. Okay, so the 77s refers to 70 units of weeks. The 490 years are divided into 3 sections. Verse 25 is important. From the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Anointed One, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. Well, there are many interpretations of these verses, but for our discussion, let's consider that the timeline begins with the decree authorizing the rebuilding of Jerusalem as described in Ezra and Nehemiah, and ends with the coming of Jesus. The final 7th is detailed in verse 26 and 27. After the 62 sevens, the Anointed One will be cut off and will have nothing. The people of the ruler, or the Antichrist, will come and destroy the city and the sanctuary. In verse 27, the Antichrist will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of that 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. This verse anticipates the 3.5-year ministry of Jesus, followed by his crucifixion. But it also looks forward to the end of time and parallels the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in AD 70. And some believe that the second 3.5-year period of the final 7th will be what is described as the Great Tribulation, as described by Jesus in Matthew 24. So the study of time events frequently results in people falling into several different categories. They generally can be thought of as pre-millennials, millennials, and post-millennials. I'm a pan-millennials. In that I believe God is in control and it will all pan out all right in the end. So let's dive into the questions. If this is your first time with us, what we do now is I'll ask you a question designed to help you all discuss the content of this chapter and give you an opportunity to pause the video with the question on screen. Then, when you are done discussing that question, you can hit play and move on to the next one. So, okay, here we go. Question 1. What impressed you about Daniel's prayers of confession and repentance in Daniel 9, 1 through 23? Now push pause. Moving on to question 2. Learning how God's prophecy was fulfilled to the exact year of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, how does understanding this impact your faith? Now push pause. Okay, last one. The last block of time prophesies a future 7-year period that is yet to come in verse 27. What do you understand that to mean, and how do you respond to that? Now push pause. So that's week 9. I hope you all enjoyed our time together and learned something along the way. Don't forget, you can view more content around the Daniel series at the Daniel series page on our website. Let's keep reading the book together and spending time praying that God would move in our hearts and show us where He would have us learn and grow through this study. I can't wait to go through chapter 10 with you all next week. We'll see you then.